Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the MintCast, the official podcast of MintPress News. I'm Mnar Adley, the founder and director of MintPress, and we've had a little bit of a hiatus to this podcast. Many people have reached out to me asking why we haven't published in the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to let everyone know that I was actually being harassed and stalked by a Trump MAGA supporter. And I wouldn't say it shook me, but I had to take my safety very seriously. And so I decided to take a couple of weeks off of this podcast to sort things out and ensure that my safety was prioritized. Of course, the timing couldn't have been worse because the United States and Israel launched this horrific and illegal war against Iran. And today is day 27 of the US-Israeli war against Iran. Trump might have bitten off more than he can chew in this war. He thought he would simply decapitate its leadership in an airstrike and the whole society of Iran would fall apart. The bombing has certainly been deadly. Almost 2,000 people in Iran have been killed and more than 24,000 people injured. But instead of capitulating, Iran is fighting back, downing US jets, hitting US bases across the region, and destroying Israeli military bases and closing the Strait of Hormuz, an action that could lead to a global economic collapse. Despite all of this, Trump is reportedly still considering a US invasion of Iran with troops on the ground, a country 4 times larger than Iraq. The Iranian message to US forces has been very clear. Come closer and find out. Joining me today to unpack the events happening inside of Iran and what this all means, what the repercussions are, is we have Ali Alizadeh and Robert Inlakesh. Ali Alizadeh is a London-based political analyst and news presenter at Jeddah TV, and Robert Inlakesh is a journalist and geopolitical analyst specializing in West Asia. He's also a staff writer and social media journalist at MintPress News. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hi, Manura, and thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm a big fan of MintPress. I've been following it for years and I have learned a lot from MintPress. I remember back in time in 2017-18 when I came across MintPress first, I read many of the articles which I couldn't find anywhere else and disclosing different aspects of the empire, especially the institutions involved in soft power and soft war. Nowadays, it's easy to talk about the role of USAID, NED, and different organizations connected to the State Department. But back in time, I learned a lot of my knowledge from your work. So I appreciate to be here today.
That is very kind of you to say. Thank you so much. And Robert, thank you for also being yes. Thank you for being here, Robert. I know, what can we say? That was a very humbling introduction. Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a lot to talk about because since I've started MintPress, what we said 14 years ago, we've been talking about the US preparing to attack Iran for all of these years. And here we are witnessing it. And it's just been absolutely horrifying. And this week alone, Mossad chief David Barnea admitted that it was Israeli intelligence behind the riots in Iran just a few months ago. And he said it's going to take another year for a full regime change operation in Iran to be fulfilled. He said that this week. And then we have White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt. Just yesterday, she boasted that Trump actually already accomplished regime change in Iran. And I want to play this clip before I ask you for your reaction on this.
Sure, Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. On March 6th, the president said in an interview with Reuters that the U.S. should have a role in choosing Iran's next leadership. Now that we're almost 4 weeks into the operation, is that still the president's assessment of where things should go?
As I've said repeatedly, I think the president obviously believes the United States wants to have someone in leadership position in the Iranian regime that will be much more favorable, that will be willing to work with the United States, that will no longer chant death to America. These would obviously be good common sense things for the United States and for our allies. I think that's what the president meant when he spoke with Reuters that day. Go ahead.
The president yesterday said that he had achieved regime change in Iran because the regime has changed. In terms of...
has it not?
Well, the leadership...
Their entire leadership has been killed, and nobody has really seen or legitimately heard from this alleged new leader. So wouldn't you say there's been a change in the regime?
There's been a change in leadership. I mean, do you
There's been
feel
a
as
change in
though
the regime leadership, which is what the president said. So thank you for confirming he was right.
I mean, do you feel as though you've achieved leadership level or the personnel in place right now in Iran that you're satisfied with? I mean, have you?
I think it's too soon to say.
All right, what is your reaction, Ali, on the White House spokesperson statement?
Actually, that statement itself is very telling about the situation. 28 days ago, the day before the war started, I think we were given a signal of how delusional the decision-making behind this war has been. And I'm referring to what Steve Witkoff said in his interview when he said the president is frustrated why, with all this massive military buildup, Iranians are not already surrendering. And so the fact that Trump didn't understand back then why bringing two massive aircraft carrier to this region with all the F-35 and F-16 and F-18 on it is not enough for Iran to surrender has been the main story of this war. And even today, Trump doesn't get it. Doesn't understand. Trump is, in terms of 5 stages of grief, he's in the stage of denial. So every time he brings another weapon, he show it. He talked to his people about that, and said massive weapon is like talking about troops coming, the amphibious, etc. And he doesn't get why Iranians don't surrender. So I think what the spokespersons did was the right thing. They just tried to change the meaning of the word victory and the regime change. So in a sense, I'm really worried for kind of Merriam-Webster's dictionary. And in a sense, Trump may attack the building and try to force them to change the meaning of the word regime change from now on. That's much easier to do rather than inflicting a real regime change to Iran. The reason that they don't understand the possibility of regime change in Iran is because they still talk about regime. 28 days into the war, they killed a lot of commanders, a lot of top politicians in Iran, including martyr Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran, many of his family and relatives, Ali Larijani, the one who was actually in charge of national security. And still, the system is running more smoothly than ever. I have to say, in a sense, the country has never been so efficient as it has been in the last 28 days, because Trump, by assassinating Ayatollah Khamenei, unleashed something both at the top level among the elite forces of the state, but also at the bottom among the people. So in a sense, Iran is not the same country that you've seen and Americans have seen in the last 20 years coming to negotiation, and then the massive fracture between the liberals on one side, Iranian liberals, Rouhani, Zarif, Khatami, and reformists, and then more realists, what they were in the West, they call them hardliners anymore. No, the country is like much more consolidated. The IRGC and those who have a complete resolve on the necessity of defense are in the center, are behind the wheel, and you don't hear much divisive voices anymore. No one has heard from Zarif in the last 28 days, from Rouhani, Hassan Rouhani, the ex-president, who all these forces who were worried about the war, all these forces who were constantly preaching about the necessity of negotiation, they're almost been sidetracked by the situation, not by any forces, not by in a authoritarian way, by the people, because something new has happened in Iran, and that's the revival of the republic, the revival of Islamic revolution. Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei the Junior, who's the new leader, said in his message for Iran's New Year on 21st of March that the country is being run by the people, and that's not an exaggeration or a poetic representation. Every night, about 5 to 10 million Iranians come to streets under the possibility of bombardment, with many of them here, F-35s, miraging and going from here to there and trying to scare them. And many people have already been killed in these gatherings. They come in a carnivalesque way, in between, in a very epic way, but also mourning for the loss of the leader, loss of many people. And they fill the streets of the country. they do two things. One, they neutralize the plan for using cities for hybrid warfare and creating a possibility of uprising or guerrilla warfare by terrorists coming from the west border, those who were trained by Israelis. They neutralize that, but also they do another thing. They almost in a collective way, they create an assembly which decide the policies of the country. So when Commander Tank Siri, who got martyred today, the head of IRGC's Navy, started put a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, people on the street started chanting that make the strait narrower, narrower, narrower. When Iran shot at Dimona, 5 million people in many cities started shouting in a collective way, in a decentralized way, to say Javad Mousavi, the head of Iran's IRGC's Air Force, hit Dimona again, hit Dimona again. We are all for you. When the United States and Donald Trump started giving signal that they are in negotiation with Ghalibaf, and Ghalibaf, the head of parliament, might be the next Delcy Rodriguez, and Politico said that Trump's admin are eyeing at Ghalibaf, which was an absolute lie. That was a disgusting, dirty tactic to create division inside the Iranian state and make suspicion among people in the state. Millions of people shouted slogans in support of Ghalibaf, that we are 100% behind you, we don't buy the crap. So in a sense, this is a new Iran. This energy is pushing the country forward. And so there is no possibility of regime change because the state has been revived, the society has been revived. And I think Americans have put their head into the sand. They don't even want to see what they inadvertently have created. I wouldn't see in my dreams such a day like today. Whoever I talk to in Iran, they say it really feels like February 1979, March 1979. It's a different sentiment, it's a different country, and in a sense, the real threat in Iran, which was from within, from the oligarchy class, from the neoliberal classes who wanted to make detente with the West, who wanted to make concession, compromise to keep their economic profit, they all have gone. They've all been sidetracked because the leader proved to be a man who was truthful, who stayed in his office like a very ordinary Iranian person, and he got martyred along his three of his grandchildren, his son-in-law, his daughter-in-law, and that itself put Iran on a new path.
It's incredible. I mean, the Iranian people, were seeing videos of them like in the millions, like out on the streets supporting their government, and then you have the audacity by people like Piers Morgan interviewing Dr. Marandi and be like, the people in Iran don't really support the government. Like, they're so out of touch, Western press, with the reality on the ground. But I think maybe they're not out of touch. I think it's just, propaganda. They're just, the framing of this is just so ridiculous. But one of the major global stories that came out of this crisis is the fact that Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, shutting down a large chunk of global trade. And now they're allowing friendly countries through, like this week, they allowed a Thai oil tanker, for example, to go through for free. But as we've seen, Iran doesn't even actually seem fazed by this. It's the global superpowers like the US, Europe, and Gulf states who are panicking over the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. It's like they're almost surprised that Iran even took this measure. So what are the global economic consequences, Ali, of the strait being closed?
As you can see, first of all, the oil jumped over $100, but that's like a misrepresentation because oil is not $100 or $120. The real price of oil is $180, $175 because the price of oil before the strait is something, the price of oil after the strait is something else. Oil, I think last week I looked at the figure, oil delivered by Omanis has gone to $175. So that's the real price of oil, yeah? And that's number one. Second is many of the LNG has been affected. As you know, Ras Laffan, the second biggest LNG producer in the world, was hit by Iranians. That's going to take, and 17% of LNG production was affected, and that takes about 2 to 5 years for it to come back to production. And that's the second one. Third thing is, as FD mentioned yesterday, Strait of Hormuz is not only allowing the oil and gas to pass, many of the petrochemical elements, sulfur, for example, and many of the minerals like gallium, also helium, and these are very important for semiconductors, for creating wafer, which in the production of semiconductors used by South Korea and Taiwan. So you're going to have a massive inflation in price of electronics soon. Yeah, and supply chain globally has been affected, and you're going to see in the next months. Many of the analysts believe that the effect of Iran war is going to be much more than the effect of Ukraine war in 2022. And so we're going to have the inflation, which is much more than that time. We already talk about like 4.6% inflation in the United States. Inflation in Europe has started. The mortgage rate has already been increased. And the problem is these are not going to be short impact, which is going to last as long as the war has lasted. Many of them are going to last for years. So it's going to be very difficult for America to undo the impact of what happened in the last month. And also, that's only now, before Iran shuts the Strait of Hormuz, because Iran believes that the Strait of Hormuz is open, it's not shut. Shutting the Strait of Hormuz happens if America starts doing something more crazy and tries to escalate more. That's when Iran will lay mines, and then no one can pass the Strait of Hormuz, neither a Thai tanker nor Iranian tanker. And that's going to have impacts on global economy for the next 10 to 20 years. Iranians don't want to do that, and they really want to they don't want to be put in such a situation. But as we are talking now, Iran basically is doing to global economy what America has done for the last 20 years. Iran has put a moral sanctions on the global economy. Countries who are involved in killing babies, countries who are involved in genocide, in killing Palestinians, countries who are involved in creating war in the region, attacking Iran, they're not allowed to cross the strait. Other countries, especially many countries from global south, they are welcome to pass. As you saw from Thai, also Iran allowed India to pass the other day. There are reports of other countries which have passed in the last few weeks too.
And Robert, how has the closure of the Strait of Hormuz affected the countries in the Middle East and West Asia, like the Gulf countries?
Well, these Persian Gulf states, of course, they draw the majority of their profits from their economies are built on the back of using the Strait of Hormuz. So for these countries, it's not just the fact that they cannot export gas anymore. It's the fact that they're enduring missiles and sirens, and for the likes of the United Arab Emirates, in particular Dubai and Abu Dhabi, their entire tourist industry has been collapsed. So we've got to understand that countries like the United Arab Emirates and even Saudi Arabia developed these visions like Vision 2030 to try and diversify their economies, because they understood that depending solely on their natural resources was not the smart strategic move to make in the long term. That has been done away with now. So their entire strategies to diversify their economies has been flushed down the toilet. And this has all been due to the fact that they had these military bases and facilities in their countries from which the United States was capable of launching all of these attacks on Iran. And of course, it's not just Iran as well that the United States uses these bases in order to conduct operations in the region. It's all over the region. They've been using these bases and these radars and these facilities in order to target Iraq, in order to target Syria and beyond. And so ultimately, they believed that U.S. military presence on their soil was going to somehow benefit them and benefit their security and their economies. And if they just invested a large amount in the United States and bought their military equipment, this was going to somehow save them. And they're seeing before their eyes this entire strategy collapse. And contrary to the claims of the United States that Iran would simply collapse if you kill one person or conduct a decapitation strike, it is these Persian Gulf Arab states that if you were to take out the leadership, there's nothing left. So it's the complete opposite. And this comes back to the Orientalist thinking that is present in the West. And you see this in the think tanks in Washington, D.C., the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. They've been talking about this war and exactly how it's going to go since right after the 12-day war, as if they didn't learn anything then when Israel carried out a decapitation strike, and it was actually more successful at the time, the Israeli strike against Iran. And again, they extend this delusional thinking not only to Iran, but of course to Hezbollah in Lebanon, where there was a big blow that was dealt to Hezbollah with the assassinations of senior leadership, in particular Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, but Hezbollah now has come back even stronger. And so this whole doctrine that they've adopted, assuming that Iran, it is exactly the same as Saddam Hussein's Iraq, is rather ridiculous. Now, the global economy is taking a hit, the Arab Gulf states, they'll never fully recover. I mean, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, the Kuwaiti economy never bounced back to where it to the position it was before. It took a very, very long time to recover properly, and Kuwait didn't get to the level where it was prior to this. And that was brief, and it was not as extensive as this war is. And so, again, it comes back to a lack of strategy. I would have to put it down to the Israelis have controlled this from the get-go, and their strategy is to simply inflict maximum damage on Iranian civilian infrastructure, hoping again, and this is the Orientalist thinking, and assuming that Iran is like other countries in the region, that if they just damage Iran bad enough, it will turn out like Syria. And eventually under sanctions in the long term, perhaps there could be a regime change. And again, these are all, I believe, to be miscalculations.
And Robert, you recently wrote an article for MintPress titled that the U.S. may seize, or at least they're trying to, or thinking about it, or considering to seize 3 Iranian islands, including the famous Karg Island. Can you tell us more about this and the significance of these islands for Iran's oil and military power? And then I would love to get Ali's perspective on this as well after you answer this.
Yeah, I'd certainly be interested in Ali's analysis on this. Well, in essence, taking Karg Island, which is, of course, in the north of the Persian Gulf, it's essential to, of course, Iran's ability to export gas. However, it's more difficult logistically to take. It's closer to the Iranian mainland, and it's very well defended, as we know. And so it's of course, a target that would damage perhaps Iran economically. To the extent that that would work, I don't know. I can't speak to the extent that it would end up damaging Iran in the long term. I'm not exactly an expert on Iran's economy and how it functions particularly. But it makes more sense for the United States to go after what are called the Free Islands. And so the largest of which is Abu Musa. They are located off of the coast of Ras Al Khaimah, which is an emirate in the United Arab Emirates, and it's like a city state. And the UAE has historically claimed these free islands. It argues they are theirs. They were taken by Iran in 1971. And now the United Arab Emirates has been making a big stink about these islands for a very long time. But they are situated right next to the Strait of Hormuz. So they're, strategically speaking, it would probably be more smart to take these islands, perhaps, if you're an American planner. And we have heard that the United States has deployed forces inside the United Arab Emirates. And also there was explicit threats made from the Iranian military towards Ras Al Khaimah because of the fact that this could be a launching pad. And also we know that from leading IRGC officials that they had in the past said that Abu Musa specifically, this island, is the beating heart of Iran in the Persian Gulf. Like, this sort of language has been attached to it. So there has been some sort of, let's say, military importance attached to these islands. ultimately, I believe that even if they were to assault these islands and to take them, it wouldn't change the circumstances here. And the reason why I say this, because these would be bloody endeavors, which, the likes of US Senator Lindsey Graham compared it to seizing Iwo Jima. This was a battle in World War II, which the US suffered 26,000 casualties in order to take it. But if they were to try and do something like this, and even if they completely took over these islands, including Kharg Island, this doesn't change the circumstance on the ground. The Ansar Allah, which the Red Sea is much more vast, was capable of fending off a US military operation, including their aircraft carrier and everything they brought in last year, attempting to break the blockade that had been imposed by Ansar Allah so that ships could not get through and transit the Red Sea and reach the Israelis. So Iran, all it has to do, again, it can lay those mines, but also as long as it has missiles and drones, no ship is getting through. That's just the reality of it, and it's a narrow passage. So even if it tries this, and it might try and, anchor itself on the UAE's claims to these islands, the fact that they're closer to the United Arab Emirates, logistically, perhaps it's more easy for them to try and assault these islands. That I don't know. I don't know the extent to which Iran has prepared for this. But Iran as well sees this coming, and that's very clear. So they may try to assault these islands, but it's more for a photo op, in my opinion.
And Ali, what can you tell us more about these 3 islands, their significance, and what would happen if the U.S. military, supposedly seized them?
We're talking about 2 different things. One is Khark Island, which is like much further towards the east, and the other one is the 3 islands called Tom, a small Tom, a big Tom, and Abu Musa. The 3 islands are something that UAE has been eyeing at them, and that's why UAE is a party to this war. And Iranians have been very, very conscious about the fact that they are not only fighting against United States and Israel, they know that behind the scene, UAE has been part of it. And because the UAE thinks, despite all the damages has been inflicted to its economy, to its brand, and to its image, but if it can take over these 3 islands, it can add to its prestige and also its overall global posture. UAE has been acting almost like Republic of Venice there in 16th century, has almost ambitions much more than its capacity, is part of the genocide in Sudan. It was part of genocide in Yemen and has taken part of Yemen as well. So it's acting like a navy power and tries to be in a strategic position monitoring over the Strait of Hormuz. However, if UAE or Americans touch these 3 islands, in my opinion, it will have the same effect it had when they assassinated Ayatollah Khamenei. It will create a rally around the flag force inside the country, which will be unprecedented, because until now we have this like about 30-40% of Iranians who are supporters of the state. Then you have like this middle class who've been more or less silent, but they've been revived and they don't want regime change. But then there are like 5-10% who are inside of like United States and Israel. Yeah? But if they touch these 3 islands, especially coming from an Arab country, it will really create a massive nationalist sentiment in the country, number one. Number two, as Ghalibaf, the head of spokesperson of parliament, said yesterday, Iran knows that UAE is behind this. He didn't mention the name UAE, but he said, we know one of the regional countries is behind this, and we will destroy its infrastructures in an unprecedented way, he said. That means the moment United States start moving towards these 3 islands, all water salination of UAE will be gone. And 70% of UAE's water comes from water salination. That means UAE will not be able to survive more than a week for basic things. And also Iran has already depleted UAE's anti-air missiles. UAE asked America for resupply last week, and Americans told them that, sorry, our focus and our priority is Israel, not you, because we are very racist. But in our racism, after white people comes like Israeli people. UAE Arabs are not in the position of priority for us. So in a sense, Iran has easy access to UAE's sky and will go for that. That's not number one. Number two, question of Kharg. Kharg is something that, as Robert said, especially Lindsey Graham has been pushing for it. And now I saw today that I think the head of Republicans in Senate has been talking about that. Trump has brought both Marines and airborne 82nd Division airborne to the region. So he has about 10,000 troops for such a mission. It looks really easy if you watch a lot of Hollywood movies, but in reality, it's going to be a suicide for United States. What's going to happen? First, if they start the amphibious vessels that start moving towards Khark, Iran will, as Robert said correctly, start laying mine on the Strait of Hormuz and on the Gulf. That's number one. Even if they send paratroopers from airborne paratroopers from the sky, which is the safest thing for them, Iran will have. When they land, they're under Iran's fire. Iran's drones, Iran's short-range missiles can target them. But the strategy is they're going to go and take shelter under Iran's oil facility. Khark doesn't produce any oil, but it's a terminal in which a big portion of Iran's oil is exported. However, given this is an existential war from Iranian point of view, I'm telling you, today is 26th of March, but let's just, no one these days makes a kind of certain claim, but let me just make a certain claim for you. If they do that, Iranians are willing to destroy their own oil facilities and create an scorched earth scenario, because it's an existential war for Iran. In addition, Iran has been thinking about this moment for a long time, and so they already have another pipe capable of exporting and moving 1 million barrels going to Jusk, which is after the Strait of Hormuz. So it's not going to be fully crippling for Iran. Even if it was crippling for Iran, Iran's economy is used to sanction. Iran's economy has been hardened because of sanctions, because of what America has done in the last 14 years. Iran has had days in which they could only export 250,000 barrels a day, and they still survived back in 2019, 2020. So UAE, Qatar, Saudi, Kuwait, even Iraq, they cannot survive without export. But Iran has been living this for the last 14 years. So it's not going to be the end of the world for Iran. And Iran will be ready to destroy its own oil facilities and destroy Khark, and after that, destroy whoever comes there. Actually, I should tell you that Iranians are quite tempted and are looking forward to such a scenario, because many people in Iran, among the commanders of IRGC and army, think that this war will not be finished before we manage to inflict a massive fatality to American army. Unless there's 2,000-3,000 American soldiers going back to America in coffins, Trump is not going to end this war, and we cannot manage to revive our deterrence. So that is going to be the only chance for Iran to have a one-to-one combat with the American troops. So in a sense, many of them look forward to it. In addition, the moment that Khark Island is occupied, Iran sees its legitimate right to destroy every single production unit of oil and gas in the region. So Aramco will be up air a day after that. Saudi will not be able to export for the next 5 years. So as today I was coming here, I was listening to Larry Fink from BlackRock saying that what's happening now is going to have long-lasting impact of oil above $100 for many months and a year. And then if Khark Island is taken over, which allows Iran to escalate as well and retaliate, that means like oil above 150 or 200 for many years to come. So in a sense, we're going to go from a recession that Larry Fink was predicting to a massive global crisis. And I think that's a possibility because in a sense, Trump doesn't have another option. Trump has put itself on the escalation ladder and has cornered himself stupidly. And so, in a sense, if you look at it from a dialectical point of view, when the history is doing its job, you always need a figure to come and accelerate the movement of history. The same way that Napoleon was a figure moving the history from a Hegelian point of view towards modernity, it seems that Donald Trump is insisting to be that figure who is accelerating the decline of American empire and the shift, complete shift to the multipolar order. And I think what he's going to do by sending troops to Khark Island will be the last nail on his coffin.
It really, I mean, Trump really has put himself in a corner in such a way. I mean, because the biggest loser in this war doesn't even look like to be Israel. It looks like it's the United States. All of their military bases have been struck and destroyed. Their radar systems, their missile defense systems in the region have been destroyed. I mean, this is like billions upon billions of dollars that the United States has lost. And Trump he keeps going. And it's really the US empire that he's bringing down. And it's almost like Israel just loves watching this happen. They want the United States and all of these Arab Gulf neighbors to succumb to all of these losses. And I want to talk a little bit more about the damage to these US bases in the region. I mean, the Gulf allies have released the most ridiculous statements condemning Iran. I mean, when Israel was committing a genocide in Gaza, they didn't even release these kinds of statements, right? And so let's go through some of the countries that have been targeted the most. And of course, it is the US bases, but now Iran has announced that they will target banks and tech hubs for, Apple, for example, Oracle. I believe, maybe you can tell us more, Ali, about what other industries and companies that Iran has threatened.
Very early on, the AWS data center owned by Amazon in Emirates and Abu Dhabi got targeted by Iran, and then Iran, I think they did target few more of the data centers in UAE as well. But also, as you know, the Ras Laffan in Qatar, there was a joint venture with the American oil company. ExxonMobil. And so, in a sense, Iranians published the list of companies in the region in which Americans had a share. And so they said, for us, all of them are legitimate targets. So in a sense, from Iranian point of view, Iran is not attacking countries in the region. Iran is attacking American bases. And sometimes, as today said Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, said American soldiers take shelter in hotels in these countries. So for us, that's an illegal thing. The hotels shouldn't let them in. But let me just say something. When did America come to this region? 1990, under the excuse of Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. But then the end of the Cold War, America used the opportunity, exploited the opportunity to almost occupy the region. 26 military bases surrounding Iran. And then with invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, they got even more. Yeah. So in a sense, we are coming to the end of Iran. That's what Iran is doing, is telling America the time for unilateral period is over. The time of your monopoly is over. Get out of the region, because no country can be sovereign in the region. And look at that. UAE, Qatar, Saudi, they spend $2.3 trillion in terms of incentives, contracts, and deals with Donald Trump only 6 months ago. So they gave him one of the biggest bribes in the history of human being, 2.3 trillion. And that's in addition to Emir of Qatar giving his personal aeroplane just for security. So they traded the sovereignty for security. And still, America didn't care about that. America prioritized Israel's security over Qatar, Saudi, and UAE. So in a sense, what Iran is doing is useful for every other country in the region as well, getting rid of United States presence here, which has brought nothing but destabilization and insecurity. I think people of the region should decide for themselves. And that's what Ayatollah Khamenei said, Qasem Soleimani said. and many other Iranian leaders have said in the last 10, 15 years, Iran doesn't want to be hegemon of the region. Iran doesn't have any domineering ambition for the region. Iran has two main regional policies and regional aims. One, to push United States out of the region, and second, have a free referendum for people for Palestine and give the self-determination to Palestinians. Because in a sense, as we all have witnessed in the last 2.5, 3 years, it's not possible to coexist and cohabit with a genociding power which is being supported by every Western government and state. So it's not possible to have a West Asia which is free from war, coup d'etats, civil wars, and assassinations, as long as Israel has such a power there, and America gives Israel defense by its presence in different military bases here and there.
Absolutely. And Robert, can you kind of break down what Iran has targeted in terms of military bases and military equipment in the region from the inside of these Gulf states, and what that looks like?
Well, they've targeted every major U.S. base in the Persian Gulf, and the results of that are very clear. Even the New York Times has admitted that over a dozen U.S. military bases have been all but evacuated and if not completely destroyed. Most of the base has been damaged. And we know that there was a lot of censorship that was imposed by these Persian Gulf Arab states. So at the start, we were seeing a lot of hits. We were seeing Iranian missiles and drones target different sites, and we saw them take out radars, for instance. That was a big blow to the overall U.S. air defense systems in the region. They took out a major radar in Qatar, and then they went after the THAAD air defense systems. Of course, there were some, I believe, located in the United Arab Emirates, but also in Jordan, and then the Israeli ones as well. So they sort of tore apart their air defense systems, their radars. So the Israelis, even before, at the start of the war, they had about a 15-minute period of warning when Iran would fire missiles. Now, it's just, a lot of the time, it's down to only a few minutes that they have of warning before the sirens start ringing. And that is to do with the destruction of these radars and the capabilities. That's also what Hezbollah has been targeting as well, is a lot of radars and taking out the capabilities, the air defense capabilities of the Israelis, because of course this means that Iran has to expend less missiles. It can use some more of its advanced technology without the likelihood of the United States and the Israelis and their joint air defenses in the region taking any of them out of the sky, or a large portion of them out of the sky. And then they've targeted, of course, in retaliation to a number of different strikes and measures, oil and gas facilities. They've targeted as well, we know, major US multinational corporations, because these corporations and these firms, these big tech companies, as we know from the genocide in Gaza, are, through their AI technology and software, are directly complicit in the likes of the Gaza genocide. And we know that that's been demonstrated. So these are not companies that operate, let's say, outside of the sphere of the military industrial complex, because their software and technology is used by militaries, even if they're not directly working with them at the time and collaborating directly. That technology is sold on to them, it's used, it's developed, that's those platforms that are used. So we've seen these multinational corporations targeted, we've seen banks targeted in retaliation for an Iranian bank targeted, in retaliation for Israel's attacks on nuclear facilities like Natanz. The Iranians again struck very close to Dimona and the nuclear reactor there. And these were significant missile strikes that occurred. There were a lot of casualties in some of these attacks that took place. Now, of course, the Israelis are concealing a lot of their losses. But in terms of what they're targeting, we see the effects. These military bases are evacuated. In the case of Iraq, and of course, the Iraqi resistance played a large role in this too. NATO has evacuated the country, and the U.S. forces as well have evacuated most of the country too. They're most highly concentrated now in the north, in the likes of Erbil and other areas. So they're having to flee, and even in Syria, their forces have come under attack and suffered casualties. And so they've had to flee positions inside of Syria and retreat back to Jordan. So what we're seeing is this methodical destruction of the US military presence in the entire region. And anyone that escalates from any direction will get a direct retaliation. And there are new surprises that we see every single day. Like we saw, for instance, the interception of an F-35 fighter jet. The daily, the United States says that they destroyed all of Iran's air defense systems in like the first 10 minutes or whatever that Trump was claiming within the first few hours. But yet the air defenses are still taking down drones on a daily basis. And I believe this is strategic. The United States and Israel, their sort of doctrine when it comes to war is they like quick, fast wars, fast victories. They bring in intense firepower, especially at the beginning. They utilize their intelligence communities, and they, of course, utilize their assets on the ground, their agents, in order to inflict blows. But they're not good at fighting long wars. They're really not. The United States military is very risk adverse. The Israelis are not good at fighting long wars of attrition. As we've seen in Gaza, they just didn't go after the resistance. They just bombed the entire territory, and still the resistance groups are all there. They didn't even defeat the Mujahideen brigades, like a small group in the Gaza Strip, for instance, or the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades. They didn't defeat them. I mean, let alone Hamas or Islamic Jihad or the PFLP. And so we see every day there's something new that is targeted. And there are new surprises and tricks, types of munitions, which are fired from Iran and its allies, which are clearly coordinating with it. So I see that this is a fight that has been paced. It's strategic, the way that it's being implemented. It's not just throwing missiles. You'll hear these depictions in the Western corporate media. Iran just attacked everyone. And that's just not true in the way that it worked. Iran said it was going to target those bases. Iran was attacked from those bases. And of course, it is targeting the interests of the United States. It's not just going to be attacked and do nothing. And it is strategic. That's a difference between the US and Israel's strategy, which was to throw in like the most firepower at the start. And then from that point on, after about 4 or 5 days, when they started getting closer to operational exhaustion, they were like, okay, we have to pull back. What we have to do now is, smaller strikes throughout the day or 2 or 3 big attacks during the day. And they're targeting what? Cultural sites. They're targeting police stations. They might target government buildings, civilian infrastructure, schools. It's civilian infrastructure that they're targeting. What's the strategy there with this? There is none. But the Iranians on the other side have got a strategy, which of course they've been developing for a very long time.
So actually, if I can just add to what Robert said, it's very interesting and it's very correct, because we are witnessing the lack of a strategy on American side completely. And that's something that General Mattis said yesterday as well, that despite 15,000 targets, hasn't been a clear strategy. The strategy that Donald Trump had was like a very quick victory in the first 48 hours by decapitation of Iran's leader, and then targeting 2,000 different places. And then he thought that's going to give him victory. And since then, he hasn't come up with another strategy. And look at that. The war objective is lost as well, because now America, instead of focusing on its initial objective, is now dealing with something which didn't exist 3 weeks ago, namely the opening of a Strait of Hormuz, which even was not closed before this war. However, if I want to make it slightly more complicated, I should say that Israelis are slightly more strategic in this war. And they think with the presence of the United States here, they can degrade Iran both militarily and also economically for the day after war. So in a sense, why they are destroying Iran's humanitarian and civilian infrastructure, why they are destroying pharmaceutical companies, why they are destroying car manufacturing companies, is it a mistake? I think it's not, because they want to, in a sense, destroy Iran's overall projection of power for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's why they have to gradually deceive United States and push it further and further into this quagmire, and they don't care. Robert said very correctly that, in a sense, I think like Manura said that in a sense Israelis are watching behind how the region is being destroyed and how American empire is being destroyed, and they don't care because their objective is different. Their objective is, who cares if America spends all its resources here and then loses its ability in the rest of the world, as long as Iran is completely destroyed as well. And these 15,000 targets become 40,000 targets. And then if we manage to push United States for use of tactical nukes, for example, in the name of destroying Iran's missile cities, which are underground, bringing a lot of tactical nukes, attacking here and there, and making a scorched earth in Iran. Yes, Iran is capable of retaliating and destroy Saudi, Qatar, and UAE, but who cares? At least Israelis don't care. Israelis are dreaming of the day that OpenAI, Oracle, Amazon, they all move their offices from UAE, Qatar, and Saudi into Silicon Wadi in Tel Aviv. So at least at the level of their dream, they are eyeing such a thing. And that's why there's such a unity in Israel. That's why Lapid, instead of criticizing Netanyahu, is completely on board with him. That's why the Israeli public are still in majority supporting this war. And that's why if Iran wants to really change that logic, has to inflict the pain to Israel in a way that they realize that was a big mistake. And so just to complete what Robert said, Iran has been very patiently looking for day 30, 35, 40, because so far Iran has been only doing one thing, depleting both American anti-air missiles in the region who were giving cover and defense over Israel. Robert said very correctly, beginning of the war, Israelis could be informed of an explosion 16, 15 minutes in advance, and now has become 4 minutes. That's why there's not even time to go to the shelter. But second thing is, if you look at Rusi's publication yesterday, the think tank in London, they published that, I think, for example, Arrow anti-air missiles already been fully depleted. Israel has about 10 days more left of THAAD anti-air missiles. Americans themselves had about 15 days left. So by possibly by 10th or 15th of April, Iran can reach anywhere in Israel. Second thing is, Israelis are running out of offensive ammunition as well. So, for example, Blue Sparrow, which is F-35's missiles with long range, about 800 kilometers, they can shoot at Iran from outside Iranian borders, are already in the depleting phase. I think they're going to finish in 2 or 3 days. So Israelis cannot even attack Iran. That's why, in a sense, it's very correct to say that Israelis and Americans were focusing on a very intense, short war. But I think Israelis hoping that the day that comes that they are being fully depleted, America will transfer its resources from Pacific, from East Asia, from Europe, from from across the world, endanger those areas, South Korea, Taiwan, and the rest of the thing, and bring all the resources to help Israel. I think Israelis have a kind of a strategy of dragging United States step by step. So, in a sense, it's a very lethal strategy, but I think there's a cunning strategy behind the scene. I'm curious to see what Robert thinks about that.
No, that is essentially my analysis as well. I believe that this is driven by the United States, by Israel, this war. And again, their strategy, they're looking in the future. They're not looking in an immediate term, like we're going to inflict a regime change right now, because they understand that's not possible. They need, they need movement on the ground to be able to do that. And they understand it well, that after the 12-day war, they did a decapitation strike and it didn't work, and it was more successful then. So they understand that you have to go after Iran's civilian infrastructure. And as you rightly pointed out, and I've been writing about this as well, they want those Gulf Arab states done. They would like to see them, at the very least, severely weakened.
Yes.
Because to them, they don't want competitors in the region. That's just the reality. For them, having any competitors is a problem. That's why you've seen that the Israeli think tanks and Israeli politicians are now talking about Erdogan in Turkey, and are talking about Mohammed bin Salman in a way because Saudi media suddenly started criticizing, after more than 2 years of genocide in Gaza, suddenly started criticizing them. And any country that just has a posture against them could possibly have any block of power to oppose them on any level. They need to be crushed as well. And they see this as the convenient opportunity where all these Arab, and even in this case Turkey as well, are at least put down or isolated from each other and incapable of contesting the power of Israel. And so it's a long-term strategy. And like you said, there is a reason why they're going after the civilian infrastructure. And just like there was in Gaza, there was a reason behind the genocide. It wasn't simply because they just wanted to punish the people of Gaza. Of course they did. They wanted to punish the people of Gaza. But Israel operates on its so-called deterrence capacity doctrine. On October 7, Hamas shattered that, because they focus on, oh, look what happened to Israeli non-combatants being killed, and Hamas coming in and the beheaded babies and all the stories they made up about the civilian element of it. But the reality was, the thing that really bothered the Israeli leadership was the fact that Hamas, in a matter of hours with a few thousand fighters, managed to completely collapse the Israeli Sovereign Command. And despite all of their equipment, all of the most high-tech equipment that was placed along that separation barrier and the wall in Gaza, they burst through, and the Israeli military was incapable of handling what they threw at them. And so they needed to show the entire region, not just Gaza and the people of Gaza, but the entire region, that they're crazy and that they are willing to destroy everything in their path in order to get to their goals. And I think that spooked them a bit. That's why they've accelerated this project in the region. That's why they're now openly talking about Greater Israel. Because in order for this Greater Israel project to work, they want to have power in the region, not where they physically expand their borders necessarily to include Iraqi territory and put, Israeli settlers inside of, in Mosul or whatever. But they want to have divided states within the region, weak powers within the region, which are incapable of standing up to them. That in the end, they buy and they influence these, sectarian and ethno regimes that they include in an empire. That's what the Oded Yunon plan was. That was what his academic article was about when this whole Greater Israel plan was properly drawn up and conceived. So Israel does want to weaken Iran by going after infrastructure, damage it economically. And again, it's almost like that policy that they implemented with Syria, where Syria essentially had won the war, the Syrian government, under Bashar al-Assad. The military aspect of it was won. But after the war, when the sanctions came in, things got a lot worse. The situation got a lot more dire. There was a lot more corruption. And eventually, the entire state just imploded. It collapsed. It was easy. It fell so easily. There wasn't even a fight to take Damascus. And there wasn't really even a fight to take Halab either. But that being said, that I believe is the Israeli strategy. I 100% agree with you. And I believe that is what the Israelis are doing. But the United States itself, I don't see any benefits for the US. It's only negatives.
Ali, I think a lot of people who've been, following this crisis for such a long time, we are asking at this point, would Iran now consider to have nuclear weapons? Because for so long, the United States has been kind of pushing this red herring that Iran is, the bomb is coming in 2 weeks, or at least Netanyahu says that. And we've been sold over and over again that this war is about nuclear weapons and nuclear, enrichment of uranium, et cetera, et cetera. Then it was about women's rights and all of these, bogus claims. None of them, of course, are true. Now the United States is openly saying it's about just oil. We want Iran's oil. So a lot of people have argued, well, if Iran did have nuclear weapons, they wouldn't have been attacked. And of course, I understand the fatwa by Sayyid Ali Khamenei about it not being allowed. But at this point, would Iran consider having nuclear weapons?
So, I mean, I said like about months before Sayyid Ali Khamenei was assassinated that the fatwa will be gone by with Ayatollah Khamenei if in case he's assassinated. So I think that's the mood of the country as well. But let's just look at what was Iran's nuclear strategy from 2003 onward. Ayatollah Khamenei opted for making Iran into a threshold state, and I think that was a right decision for its time. Threshold state means Iran, through its capacity of enrichment, can become close to possibility of making a bomb in an unfortunate situation in which Israel or possibly America threaten Iran with such nuclear explosion. So say, for example, tomorrow Israel, which is an illegal nuclear power without having even disclosed it to the international community, threaten Iran with a nuclear explosion. Iran has 2-3 weeks to, it's called a breakout time or breakout window to build its own weapon, and that creates a deterrence. So that would stop Israel from using this. And it was very useful because it was during the unilateral moment, in a time that even China and Russia didn't want Iran to go fully nuclear. And you know that in 2008, 9, and 10, when the 3 resolutions in United Nations Security Council were issued against Iran, Russia and China didn't veto it. So and that was the basis for these massive sanctions against Iran, which crippled Iran's economy and brought its GDP growth to 0% in the last 10 years. So that was time. However, first, the global order has changed, and also Iran's relationship with China and Russia have changed, and also the mood in the country has changed. They know that the moment Iran goes nuclear, maybe a new level of pressure will be imposed on Iran, the way that it was put on North Korea back in 2006, a more tightened form of isolation. But first of all, the time is different, and there are places to go to. In 2006-07, if you be fully isolated, you had nowhere to go. But now the world is fully divided between the pro-Western camp and the BRICS camp and Shanghai camp, and Iran is a part of Shanghai and BRICS. And second, China and Russia, who don't want another power to be added to the list of nuclear club, but they prefer Iran to exist rather than being divided and separated into 4 or 5 things according to the Yinon plan. And so they prefer Iran to exist by having nuclear rather than not having another competitor in the nuclear club. So things have changed. Inside the country as well, a new layer of a new generation, a new layer of commanders have come to power. And Ayatollah Khamenei's son is a young person who's been hardened by the current situation. His wife is a martyr. His father is a martyr. His child is a martyr. His two of his nephews and nieces are martyr. His sister is a martyr. This round of assassination and American and Israeli campaign have hardened him as well. So in a sense, according to Shiite theology as well, you should not make a weapon of mass destruction. However, if you are being threatened by such weapon, it's your duty to build this up. So I'm sure Iran will make that in due time. Mohammad Javad Larijani, Ali Larijani's brother, who is a kind of senior official in Iran, said 2 days ago in the national TV that Iran will suspend its participation in NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, for the time being. And after that, will decide again whether it wants to stay in NPT or not. So the terms of the condition, the terms of Iran's relationship to its nuclear have changed. However, as we've seen in the last 28 days, Iran can survive without nuclear as well. And if in an unfortunate situation, Israel wants to use any nuclear against Iran, Iran has already signaled what can happen to Israel. By attacking Dimona, very close to the nuclear facilities of Israel, Iran has told them, I don't have nuclear bomb, but I can make a nuclear radiation in Israel, which make that country uninhabitable for the next 20 years, for the unforeseeable future. Israel is a country with 70-kilometer width at some places. Is the size of Iran is 75 times bigger than Israel. The population is 12 times bigger. So even if Israel uses nuclear bomb against Iran, it's not going to be the end of Iran. But if Iran hits Dimona with a conventional missile, that would be the end of Israel. No one can live there. So I think Israelis know that having nuclear at this situation is not much deterrence for them anymore.
And my final question for both of you gentlemen is about the destruction that Israel has faced because of Iran's retaliatory responses. Because of the Israeli military censor, we don't really know what extent the damage has been inside of Israel, but we have seen some of the videos that have come out, and it looks pretty brutal. We know that Iran has targeted military bases and some places inside of Tel Aviv. And we also have some reactions coming from some Israeli settler mayors who have literally come out crying to say that, the government is lying to us about this war and that our lands are being destroyed. And so, Ali, can you tell us what, from the Iranian perspective, what does Iran know about the extent of damage inside of Israel?
So look at that. On Saturday, Israelis finally came and said 112 people have been injured in Arad and Dimona. So that's a big confession. Netanyahu had to go to the scene, and suddenly the rhetoric changed from a language of a bully to language of victim. So they started victimizing themselves, saying that Iranians are hitting civilian targets, etc. Iranians have been reporting every day which part of Israel has been hit. However, as I said, Iran is very patient in this war and has been preparing itself for this moment for a long time. When the 12 days war was finished in July, I was critical of Iran's Iran's acceptance of ceasefire. And back in time, someone told me in Iran, someone close to the forces, that this is not the real war. So it didn't matter whether we continue this for 2 more days or 3 more days. We have to prepare ourselves for a much more bloody, much more costly and painful war. And that would be the last war we have with the United States and Israel for a long time. So they prepared themselves for this moment. And the strategy was to deplete Israel's anti-air missile, to destroy America's cover in the region, to destroy radars, as Robert said. So Iranians are looking forward to day 35 of the war, that slowly the pain appears in Israel, and they are preparing themselves for big pain. And so they are working on their own resilience of Iranian society to be able to take another 20, 30, maybe 40 days. But the question is, in day 35, when Israel's sky is open like a highway, and every Iranian missile, we're not talking about hypersonic, we're not talking about Khorramshahr or Khaybar, we're talking about ordinary Iranian missiles and drones will also pass, because there is no arrow, there is no David Slinger, there is no thought, nothing left to intercept them. Then Israelis will start thinking differently. So far, Netanyahu and the rest have been too arrogant, and they had too much hubris. They feel they're on the winning side, and Israeli society have been completely full of hubris as well. People who watch Israeli TV, they say they're all talking about greater Israel. They feel they are in a better position. But in 10 days, in 2 weeks, in a month, they're going to learn a different lesson. They are very powerful in killing children, but now they are fighting for an adult for the first time in long term. So Iran has prepared itself since 1979 for this moment. Iran's military strategy, Iran's military paradigm, Iran's economy, Iran's politics, everything is designed for such a moment, so they can continue assassinating Iranian commanders. They can continue destroying Iran Iran's civilian infrastructure, schools, factories, pharmacies, pharmaceutical units. But it doesn't matter. A country of 92 million population with 400,000 IRGC and army personnel, with many young generations of people in the intelligence, in the military, and the industrial things ready. And none of these things can destroy Iran. But Israel, a country of 6 million settler colonialists who even don't have sense of belonging there, and they can leave the country with their luggage next day, are they going to stay? Maybe if this war continues, that becomes a real existential threat to Israel. I think Netanyahu gambled because he became too confident by the last 2 years. He felt too confident by his success in Gaza and then by the toppling of Assad in Syria, and he thought his military prize is enough to win him this war. But now, and also all this talk about Iran weakened, Iran is weaker, Hezbollah doesn't exist anymore, Iraqi resistance doesn't exist anymore. They drank too much from their own Kool-Aid. The propaganda that they distributed in Washington to deceive Trump went to their own head as well. So give them 2 weeks, I promise you Netanyahu will be on his knees.
It's so funny. Every Iranian I talked to is like, just give it 2 weeks. This week they said, give it 2 weeks. One of the things that Israel and the United States have done with this hubris and this propaganda is the fact that they think that these, what they consider to be wins are actually losses for them, because what they're creating is this global resistance and distrust of the United States. I mean, I don't see how Iran or any other country can really negotiate with the United States after what they've done. The Pentagon just announced Operation Extermination against Latin America. I mean, the hubris and this, ego of the military is just so large. And they think like capturing Maduro or the sanctions against Cuba with the grid going down. They see these as, wins for themselves, but actually these are massive losses, and they're just only exposing themselves to be the psychopathic, rapists of lands and people that they truly, truly are. And more people are seeing that around the world. I mean, my God, I live in the suburbs in the state of Minnesota, and like people at the grocery store are siding with Iran. Like people at the grocery store, at the gym, at like just everywhere are talking about this war, and they are disturbed by the state of Israel. The Christian right here in America is completely divided, and more people are upset with Trump. There is no MAGA base anymore. The MAGA base has been destroyed from this illusion that Trump is America first. He's clearly Israel first. And a lot of people in this country are upset. And like you said, I think Israel is the one with the strategy here, not Trump, not the United States, not even the Pentagon. Because from all of this, it's the United States that's actually losing the most from this war. Gentlemen, either one of you, do you want to add anything else before we wrap up this conversation?
I'm just going to add one more thing. And we talked so much about Iran versus Israel and United States, but I think it would be beneficial to just zoom out a bit and realizing that Iran is not alone. Iran is part of an axis now. Apart from an axis of resistance, Iran is also part of an axis of Russia and China. So when Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, yes, Iran will kind of lose some benefit in selling oil. But who benefits? Russia. And Russia and Iran, same way that Iran benefited from Russia, from Ukraine war when Russia couldn't export anymore. And given Iran, Russia, and China are coordinating the action, so this is not a loss for the bloc of Iran, Russia, and China. So if you look at that, overall, even if Iran lose short term, this bloc is getting stronger and stronger. And that's very important. That's big part of Israel's miscalculation. Robert talked correctly and made the comparison with Syria, but Syria was in 2011 to 2018 and 19, different time, and Syria was not located in that relationship, geostrategic and geoeconomic relationship with China and Russia. With Iran, it's different. Iran will not become a scorched earth and will not be destroyed. Iran can rebuild itself very quickly with the help of especially China, and the negotiations are already there, and we can see every signal. So if you put Iran in the larger picture with its main allies, you can see both United States and Israel have been thinking out of time. They've been out of joint with the new world order and with the new global geopolitical situation.
Absolutely. And can you expand a little bit on that? Because right now, I think a lot of people would be wondering, what is the state of BRICS now with Iran being attacked and targeted in this way? And are Russia and China helping Iran?
Well, China helped Iran massively, but China has its own style. Is a very shy gentleman, so it doesn't do things like Trump. It doesn't come and shout about that, doesn't create a media fever about that. China has helped Iran with the satellite images. China helped Iran with resupply for making solid fuel for the missiles. And since the end of 12 days war, how do you think Iran prepared itself so fast? Iran has almost doubled its missile stockpile, according to Russia, since July. That's massive. Iran has built over 2,000 missiles in less than 8 months. That is not believable for America. You know, America can make 90 THAAD missiles a year. Iran has made 2,000 missiles. So for every Iranian missile, you have to send a THAAD. So you can look at the ratio, and it's much cheaper. Russia as well has been helping Iran. It helped Iran in January by helping to block Starlink satellite signals. But China has been buying Iran's oil, ignored America's sanctions, and there are a lot of behind-the-scene kind of cooperation, military intelligence cooperation. People believe that the fact that Iran's bank of targets in Persian Gulf countries has been so precise, knowing which hotel to attack, where are the American personnel, which part of Abu Dhabi and Dubai to attack, where are the data centers, etc. That doesn't come from Iran itself. Is a massive cooperation, intelligence cooperation between Iran, China, and Russia. And I'm sure China already has plans for helping Iran for rebuilding and regeneration as well. Iran and China had a contract for $600 billion over 20 years, which never came to fruit before this war. And one of the reasons was Iranian internal dynamic was too divided between pro-Western and pro-Eastern countries. But given this war has consolidated the power inside Iran, has shifted the power into those who are anti-American to their bones. They are completely anti-imperialist, and they're very clear about that. I think China and Russia feel much more confident to work with Iran. Putin said famously back in 2017 when he came to Iran that I saw two different Iran, reformist Iran and Ayatollah Khamenei Iran. But what is left today is only one Iran. That's Ayatollah Khamenei's Iran. And that is much easier for China and Russia to embrace it.
And that's what I meant by, the more the United States and Israel conduct these horrific wars and act in such psychopathic ways, the more they're creating resistance around the world, and more countries are less comfortable working with them and are turning to each other to kind of create this new global world order that pursues multipolarity. And that's what we're seeing here. And so I have learned so much from both of you. Ali and Robert, thank you so much for being here today. And we'd love, of course, to have this conversation again sometime soon as we get updates, maybe in the 2-week mark after this war, to see where we're at and continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.